Morning is the welfare debate, and we're talking to Miss LaMoynihan and Miss Linda O'Neal. And of course, Miss O'Neal, before we had our break this morning, we were talking about some of the problems involved. Miss Moynihan was telling us some of the problems involved with welfare and some of the prospects in terms of dealing with that as an issue. Let's have you to again address something that you mentioned earlier in reference to the proportion of the state budget that really goes to welfare and similar kinds of social programs. Let's talk about it from that perspective.
AFDC payments are only 2% of the state budget, and that's the specific welfare payment. There are other parts related to that that are in the state budget in terms of child care, and certainly health care, Medicaid, TennCare in Tennessee is a significant proportion of the state budget. TennCare has been an important preface to welfare reform in this state because it has expanded eligibility for health care coverage. We're now the state with the greatest percentage of people covered by health care of any state in the country because of TennCare. And yet, as we move forward with welfare reform, there are concerns that block grants and changes in TennCare could work at cross purposes to efforts to get people off welfare and into the job market. We're also concerned as we move forward with welfare reform that we do provide the assistance to get people into jobs, and as Ms. Moynihan mentioned, the job development efforts. There are concerns that if you have very short time frames for continued eligibility and people don't have jobs, there are real concerns about what's going to happen to those children, what's going to happen to their living situations. Only 35% of AFDC families live in publicly supported housing, subsidized housing. There are real concerns on the part of counties and cities and states about increases in homelessness, and particularly about the possibility of more children being in state custody because their families can no longer support them. Through AFDC, historically, we've made the choice that it's better for children to be with their families and receive welfare than to be in the custody of the state because of poverty. And with these changes, there's certainly the prospect of more children in state custody, and that's much more costly than AFDC.
It costs more to keep them in
It costs
custody
much
of the
more
state.
to keep a child in a foster home or in a group facility than it does to pay welfare. And it's not only more costly in dollar terms, it's particularly costly for those children in terms of the emotional issues that they have from separation and loss from their families and the grief issues and so forth. So it's really costly in both economic and human terms.
Very good. Ms. Moynihan, as a person who has been involved in this as an issue, social welfare and et cetera, as an issue for so long, if you had an opportunity to speak to members of Congress and Mr. Clinton and everybody who is in charge of our national policy and et cetera, what are some of the things that you would say to them this morning regarding welfare and how to best create a welfare system that would really serve the needs that a welfare system ought to serve?
To be real honest, I'm not sure that anybody will have that kind of opportunity. But given the fact that someone might, I would hope that we would continue to explore welfare reform. As Linda said earlier, no one is opposed to reforming a system, but let's watch out. Let's not try to reform the people. Let's not break up families. Let's not look for the worst in the programs. Let's find the best. We currently have a very good job training, education, and jobs work, as it's called, program here in Tennessee. It was written into the family support legislation that passed in 1988, I believe. Now, the catch is we're dismantling that whole program by the two bills that Congress is currently looking at. That can be disastrous. That was a real way out of poverty, certainly off welfare, but out of poverty is the most important thing, because unless a family is out of poverty, they can't really contribute. They are still a tax taker instead of a taxpayer. Now, we're not going to remake anybody overnight. It just doesn't happen that way. All of the legislation that the federal government is currently looking at, with a possible exception of one bill that the Democrats have introduced as a Democratic contrast to what the Republicans have passed, that bill is pretty good. But it didn't get any votes, and it's certainly not going anywhere right now. So let's face it, and I'm not blaming this on Republicans. I want to make that very clear. I'm saying, though, that they were the major forces behind both pieces of legislation that we're looking at.
And what we're talking about is primarily a concern for the people that
That's
will
right.
be affected by this. Now, Ms. O'Neal, during this last minute that we have, let's get some final comments from you in reference to this debate for today.
I think what's going to be very important is for there to be a partnership between the state, between business, between local governments and county governments to try to work together as we have welfare reform to make it the best it can be for Tennessee children and families. We can't afford not to do that. Otherwise, we're likely to have disastrous outcomes of homelessness, of children in custody, of people who are really destitute. AFDC doesn't provide much income, but it's certainly better than nothing. And we need to figure out ways to support families and to get these mothers ready to and into the labor force at jobs that can not only take them off welfare, but also lift them out of poverty.
And of course, both of you would agree that child care, and especially in the evening and during the hours that mothers really need to have children taken care of, is very, very important in any bill that they come up with.
Child care is critical.
Very good. And let me thank both of you for coming by and giving us that excellent information about welfare and some of the things that are concerned with this welfare debate that is at present in Congress. And let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.